I try to plan as much as I can, but there's only so much you can plan, right? When your endeavor takes place in a natural environment with a lot of elements that are ever changing.
Matthias, welcome to Ultra Habits, man. Good morning from Brisbane, Australia, in a different state today, but I'm glad to connect with you, man.
Thanks for having me, RJ.
Yeah, so am I pronouncing your name correctly? Is it Matthias or Matthias?
Matthias. Yeah,
Yeah, I wasn't
Matthias. Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, the French way is Matthias, which nobody can really say in English-speaking countries. So I Americanized it a little bit with Matthias, but Matthias is how they say it in Scandinavia, places like
Yeah,
that, so
yeah,
or even Germany. My
yeah.
mother's Dutch, so in Holland they say Matthijs, but yeah, I just go with Matthias. I think it's the most international pronunciation we can have.
Yeah, it would be Matthew?
No, Matthias is. I guess the Matthew in French it would be Mathieu, but Matthias is it's an old it's technically a religious name, I think, Catholic. Matthias was
Right.
technically the 13th apostle, but
Ah.
yeah, I was raised Catholic, but I evolved more on the heathen kind of side, so as a
Yeah,
mountain
you are
man.
a heathen. Now you're super Frenchy. Now you become
Yeah.
super Frenchy.
Yeah, I belong to the school of metaphysical rebellion, if that makes sense, but
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah, we're gonna go into that and kind of unpack how that all happened. I do know that you and I actually have the same birthday. So you were born on September 24th, 83, I think. I was born on
Yeah.
81.
Oh,
So we're
wow, no
actually
way.
yeah. So we're actually born on the same day. And if you're anything like a typical Libra, I understand you, bro. Like I actually, like I'm not into astrology, but yeah, a lot of what they say about Libras does make sense for me.
All right,
Yeah.
what are the main traits that you're referring to?
I would say the quest for balance and integration. Yeah, like I think for me, I'm constantly trying to assess my congruency, and I'm always reflecting on how well am I actually conducting myself. And a lot of times it's shit, sometimes it's good, but I'm constantly looking for some form of harmony. And I don't know if you relate to that or not.
Oh, 100%, all or nothing,
Yeah.
and with incessant neurosis of self-analysis and personal improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but thankfully
Yeah.
they're the mountains, so helps you connect the dots.
Yeah, I'm
Or
jealous
helps
of
me.
you. I'm jealous of where you live. Like I live in the mountains, but our mountains are nowhere near the type of mountains that you have, Mont Blanc. And I'm an ultra runner, and obviously that's the mecca of ultra running, Mont Blanc. And
Yeah.
do you run at all? Have you ever
No,
done any?
so when I was in ski academy, I used to run, right? I'd get off the couch and go do a 15K run in the mountains. I always had, naturally, I think I was always gifted with a good cardio, so I could just go and push it pretty quickly,
Yeah, yeah,
which helped me because when I went to ski academy, I had technical deficiencies compared to the mountain kids because I was not born there. But I made up for it by training extra hard. But yeah, I used to run quite a bit, but I've blown my knees 3 times. Now it's more picking my battles so I can keep going. I do enjoy running. I just don't, just the wear and tear is too much with all the other impact activities that I do. So I replace that with other kind of training. So,
mm,
but yeah, I'm currently living in Oregon in the U.S. In the middle of volcanoes. It's a great place to train, but I go back home in the Alps, 4 or 5 times, 6 times a year because this is where the heart is, and this is where yeah, all my endless list of projects yeah keeps expanding.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a bit of research, and I came across your TEDx video in Berkeley, which by the way is kind of my alma mater. That's my hometown. I didn't go to Berkeley, but I grew up in the East Bay, and
No way.
it was a wonderful conversation with the audience, really. And that the piece on stick to your landing. First of all, that video was insane, right? Like you're jumping off this mountain, right? Like I think you got your child is due in 3 weeks,
Yeah.
and it's just chaos. Can you run through what actually happened? And actually, before you do that, maybe tell our audience, what is ski jumping? Because it seems like you've put together these multiple disciplines,
Yeah.
and it's kind of culminated into this crazy,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm kind of furthering the French art of a multidisciplinary approach to the mountains. I started as a ski racer, then I moved on to free ride competitions, big mountain skiing, and then I, I grew up around hearing my dad's parachuting stories because he was in the French commandos during his military service, and I saw my first images of base jumping when I was 9. It's people jumping off cliffs with parachutes, and instantly I was like, wow, that's the coolest thing you can do with your life. And quickly, I wanted to combine both sports so I could ski things that could not be survived. So my specialty now is to ski a big mountain, jump off at the end when there's a 700 foot cliff, open a parachute, fly away, and then land softly, hopefully. And but now, after picking a lot of the easily accessible cliffs, the low hanging fruits, the craft becomes more complicated. So I by default fully became a mountaineer and an alpinist. So I can't consider myself an extreme alpinist because I'm not doing some gnarly ice climbing, things like that. But I do, hike or climb for a couple days with crampons and ice axes, 50 pounds on my back to do that one descent with a jump at the end and then fly away. So it's a full journey from the mountain. It's earning you to the top, seizing the fruit in the descent and flying away. So it's the combination of a lot of disciplines, and it's extremely fulfilling, and which I think is what we all seek in life. We all hear about seeking happiness and things like that, but in many ways, these are fleeting emotions. Happiness is worth as much as sadness, but fulfillment, once you fulfill, everything finds its place, and nobody can ever take that away from you. And when you're fulfilled, yeah, sadness will find its place, happiness will find its place, struggle will find its place, because when there's fulfillment, there's a why, and we are part of answering our neurosis as a human species is having a sense of purpose, a meaning to a meaningless existence. But what is the meaning to your existence, which then renders it as not aimless
yeah.
because you have a quest. So anyway, yeah, I threw in a lot of stuff. Sorry.
No, no, no. We're gonna dive into that. So, just on that, you mentioned purpose, intentionality, intentional living is an anecdote to our neurosis, and I tend to agree with you there. And one of the things I heard you talking about on that TEDx was your learnings from your sister's suicide.
Yeah.
Can you walk our audience through that process? Like what happened and how did you come out of that?
So, as 18 years old, I just had one of the most challenging years of my life. I blew my knee skiing, so it was my first big season-ending injury, and as a result, I was failing my first year in business school. Then had to put my dog to sleep, and I'm working in a greenhouse factory in the summer, sorting metal parts and screws and things like that.
Doing shit
To
work. Yeah,
yeah, shit
basically.
work exactly. And it was part of my business school. You had to do an internship as a worker to see what it says as the ground, but it's also on the ground, level, but also a way to make money in the summer. So I killed two birds with one stone. And then one day I'm at work and I get a call. My boss calls me in the office. It's like, "Hey, Matthias, there's a call for you. You gotta pick it up." It's like, "Oh, okay, cool, whatever." I pick up the phone and then I hear on the other end, it wasn't even my mother who called. He was uh, she had a cleaning lady at the time, and she called me. She's like, "Hey, Matthias, I'm picking you up at work in 15, 20 minutes. You got to come home. Your sister killed herself." So it's just like, boom, just, bombarded with heavy news. My sister has been struggling with, depression for years. And anyway, went home, and then I was the only kid home, right? My dad couldn't deal with the news, so he went straight to work. My mom was devastated, so I was the only one at home, so I had to pick up the phone and call my sisters. I have two other sisters. I had to give them the news, which was the worst thing ever. Being the messenger is terrible. And then I had to book the appointment in the mortuary, call the police, then book train tickets because we were in south of France, went to Paris, recognized the body, did all that thing at 18 years old, right? And right there, end of childhood or teenage years, boom, over. And yeah, I think I know him. And there's this French funeral like procession through this little village in south of France, go through the funeral and all that. And I felt like a spectator in while being in the story, in the action, It's almost like I was just observing everything, and I was trying to soak in as much as I could too, because I knew later on I would need it to digest as much as I could. It's kind of like my gut feeling about this, and seeing all these, these people around, this, sadness, or people don't not even knowing how to respond. It's a lot of sadness, numbness, and awkwardness. I think at funerals, right? And
Mm.
and right there, I started reflecting. I'm like, my knee's all fucked up. I'm going through, heavy rehab because I'd, blown my tibial plateau, meniscus,
Were you
ACL.
skiing at this time,
Yeah,
Matthias?
I was skiing pretty hard. I blew my knee skiing,
Okay.
and I was, in my sales internship in the mountains for my business school. I was on my lunch break and throwing flips in the half pipe, and then I landed at the bottom of the half pipe and just bent my knee the wrong way, the other way, and so that was it. But right there, I'm like, wow, I'm understanding that, realizing right there, it's like, well, shit, my sister was super smart. She spoke 5 languages, had a master's in history, literature. She was way beyond my level of intelligence, and but the one thing she lacked was a why, something beyond her suffering. She went through a lot of heavy stuff, but she didn't have something to that made it worth going through the struggle of everyday life. And I had it because I was still thinking about the next mountain at ski, getting back on a surfboard. I love surfing. I was thinking about learning the base jump. I had all these goals past the present state of discomfort that I was in. And right there, it was, I think a lot of the times, I think in life we commit to our goals often after a traumatic event. And her death was, in a way, the traumatic event I needed to give myself a kick in the ass and be like, well, this is what you're going to commit to, right there. And I decided to commit to my terrifying goals of jumping of things and skiing as hard as I could, and combining all these disciplines. And that's when I decided to commit to my goals, no matter how dangerous. It was that day. And after that, my road towards the search of the absolute began.
Can I ask you, would you say that your pursuit into this realm was based on an athletic pursuit or more of an answer to your own demons?
I think it's both. I think it's a quest to link everything, the mind, the heart and the body, to be a full human being, have a full existence. And I guess, a lot of it is to sublimate our frustration of human conditions or whatever struggles we encounter in life. I grew up in technically a good household with a dad who's, a doctor, four kids, stay-at-home mom, but it was a lot of emotional and mental abuse, especially
Mm,
more towards my sisters. I was kind of like the last kid, the little prince of the family, but
mm,
kind of feeling all this discomfort at home and just kind of flying my own wings. I wonder if I felt that already in the womb of my mom, because I was I was a
mm,
9 pound baby, coming out of her belly at nine, no, 5 weeks early. So
mm,
I think I was just ready for life, and at home I despised being home. I didn't like childhood. I think it was just a waste of time to know what you want to do with your life, but having to go through all the mandatory steps to be earning your emancipation. And I was like, fuck this. And I'm going to do it because I have to. And so
mm.
I don't have anybody holding me back. But that's, for me, when I saw the first images of guys doing some of the most daring things in the mountains, for me, they became my archetype of manhood. They were the definition of a successful human being that had such a high, strong sense of purpose that even death found its place in their quest. For me, it was the ultimate. Our existential fears became irrelevant. Whatever tied us down to this earth
Mm.
in our human brains was just, you know, uh,
Mm.
very, I don't know, just a artificial tool in a way, All I was studying
Mm.
was ultimate freedom of mind, body, and heart, and that was it. And I think it was a response to a frustrating environment, and frustration of life, French society, which was very stifling growing up because you have the weight of tradition, a certain way of doing things. Whereas now, I live in the US and this country drives me nuts for many other things too. So I do want to go back home. There's no perfect place on earth, right? You create your own paradise, take a piece of that, take a piece of that, and build the puzzle. But uh, but yeah, I think that was it. I think a lot of it was my daily frustration was a fuel to self-actualize with what was a calling for me. Was it? Nothing more, nothing less.
What's your relationship? What was your relationship with your father like?
My father was a loving man, sweet, sweet guy.
Mm.
But I didn't necessarily have much respect for him. He's a man of regrets. He lived his whole life saying, "Oh, I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have done this." He did the right things technically on paper, right? Providing for his family, working hard, but he hated his marriage. He, was always his mind was always traveling somewhere else when he was at home, and which I think, having goals or ambitions or ideas outside of the household is a way to deal with the the skin crawling, mundane, everyday life to deal with it, right? Because hopefully you can create a daily life that is blooming, and helps you flourish. But his was clearly a hindrance. But he loved his kids, so he was always a tortured human being, And I think it's also, my dad was born in 1939. It's another generation. He remembers the Nazis walking down the street. That's how old my
Yeah,
dad is. So it
yeah.
was a time of duty, not a time of self-actualization. It was a time of doing the right things. I guess what was imposed to you as the right things, right? He wanted to be a fighter pilot, passed all the exams, but couldn't do it because he blew his eardrum when he was 18. And then he's just stumbled into medicine because he was just a man of science. So I think his dreams were crushed early on, and but he wasn't able to come up with new dreams, and so therefore he
Mm.
just, yeah, he just. My dad was a sad man, so, but a sweet man. But yeah.
What, given your high baseline now as a person that's doing crazy shit, I mean, what's your relationship to the mundane? Like, has it helped you, or are you kind of on another planet? Like, do you struggle with the basics because your threshold and kind of need for engagement, I would perceive maybe higher than most, or am I wrong? Like, do you appreciate the mundane more? I don't know.
There's different stages, I think, in life. There was a point where I didn't want anything to do with the mundane. Made me want to throw up. That's why I sought all these things outside of the mundane. But then after that, I learned to appreciate pieces of the mundane but I could only do it after seeking a state of, transcendence and high accomplishment. Um, but now I'm enjoying it more and more. I don't know if it's maturity or because I've actually spent time to go through the fires of passion. But yeah, I think that's where I stand in right now.
How do you find your relationships, like with women? Like, are you a difficult man to be with? Like, I guess the reason I'm asking, it, with I'm an intense person. I think you're an intense person. In many ways, like I seek things that have meaning and purpose. I do have kids. I have a wife, and we're completely opposite. And sometimes negotiating that when you have goals, when you're geared a certain way, can be challenging, right? Because we need to ensure that we're able to come to other people's level too. So how do you find that?
Actually, so marriage that I had at the time of the crash, before the birth of my son is over. The second I came back from that crash, it was just downhill from there, and we're just upstream for 8 years, and then eventually ended it, right? So um, I think almost every relationship I had was intense, passionate, strong. I'm a pleaser. I love to please. I love to give myself fully to a person. But eventually, I think a lot of people, I mean, almost every relationship, they just couldn't handle it at some point, and I don't blame them, when you're super intense and super driven and one things, but it's not impossible because more than a year ago, I actually I made my absolute in a person, someone who fully resonates with me and who I fully resonates with, but someone who's a super high achiever, someone who's actually a lot like me, but in different ways too, who's a lot more poised, a lot more understanding, but has the same level of intensity and strength, but on different levels. Professional dancer, also a surgical nurse, and ex-national champion for gymnastics. So it was kind of all or nothing. But I also accepted that I was probably going to be that, man, and in my 70s or 80s, alone in the house with my dog in my house, just facing Mont Blanc and just being completely okay with it. Being lonely is not necessarily a bad thing, right? But I also always I'm a romantic. I've always stayed open, to love. I've always believed in true love since being a small child. Maybe that's the French side of me, and but I think romanticism is super important. But the thing is, you can't work if you don't have that resonance with somebody else, where you fully connect. And now I'm incredibly fortunate to have found that, and but the for me at least, the person that I'm with has to be equally as willing to fully open up and fully dive in. You know, the second something is held back, the second something is not being acknowledged or confronted or pushed under the rug. I think it's probably true for any relationships. It will all just collapse sooner or later. And yeah, but that's also what I think that's also what contributed to my heavy quest. I think growing up in the mountains, growing up in a unstable household where, there's a difference between affection and love, right? And affection with a controlling mother is actually a tool of control. And I think always seeking true love, is something that I always valued. I guess if I have to break down my three existential pillars right now, or the mountains, my vocation, true love, and fatherhood, and I try to thrive as much as I can to live a life of passion, purpose, and pragmatism. And I think that's how it finds its place. But I think a way to intensely seek the mountains was, or during projects, which I still do. I love it. This is what I'm fully fulfilled. But I think what gave me the extra drive for it was the lack of true love, and balance in relationship. And now I have it, and that's why I said my relationship with the mundane has changed and evolved. Now I can actually go to Paris and enjoy having a coffee, at a little bistro and just talking. Whereas before it'd have been like, no, screw this. What's the building we're gonna go jump tonight? No, I think it's, yeah, and again, that's why I think, passion, purpose, and pragmatism brings me having a balance between those three things. It has to stay. It's like if you think of it as a triangle, it's got to be equilateral, and if I keep that triangle equilateral, I have the balance that I seek in life.
Yeah, I was, you're talking about, you use the word existential, and I'm an existentialist as well, and I do believe in the power of crucibles and the power of continually testing ourselves and having something hard that's looming that forces us to stretch. I was thinking this morning, I'm going through an interesting time, moved to a place. We kind of are not adjusting as well as a family. And so I've started to kind of do more sitting with myself, right? More meditation, more just trying to get under the hood around what's going on in my inner world. And then I had this realization today that that's just not working. And so I decided to kind of shift the gear towards doing some hard shit again to start to move me off of myself. And I guess what I'm trying to say is it's always very difficult to understand that balance of when do you slow down when things aren't going well and shine the light internally. But for a person like me, that can just create more confusion versus, doing some really hard shit. And I'm looking at, a Guinness Book World attempt on a particular thing that's going to be really hard. And for me, as soon as I have that, I can feel my energy shifting because I'm like, okay, that's where I got to go. And it makes me a bit lighter in other areas. Like I don't start to focus on my internal issues as much because there's something there that's pulling me that's stronger. And I just wonder what your view is on that.
I think comfort feeds after a certain point, right? Once you've earned comfort, you've put yourself through the fires of passion or achievement or whatever. Comfort is something to enjoy. But after a certain amount of time, this is also what is going to make you start going crazy. And, thoughts that you had, I don't want to say conquered, but thoughts or feelings you had digested a long time ago are resurfacing again. When you thought the issue was dealt with, or it's something that would not bug you anymore, And going in the mountains is not of pushing it to the side or doing hard shit. I don't do hard shit just to do hard shit. It's just the stuff that I happen to feel fulfillment through is hard shit. And by doing it, by, mountaineering or sometimes ski touring or going knocking out, even if it's just a 2-hour ski tour in the mountains, or if I go for a 40K backcountry mission, I don't do it to self-medicate. I do it because it enables this transparent introspection that connects the dots flawlessly. And you come back sharp, acute, and you know where you stand. The biggest lesson that I learned in the mountain is acceptance. Acceptance of who I am and where I am and how I'm dealing with the conditions based on what I can do and what I am. And acceptance is key to be able to approach your environment in order to reach your goals, but to also to be in that state of being. We're constantly working on becoming. And for this short amount of time, we are. And that state of being is that true state of being with hopefully flawless execution is the apex of our life. And if we have several of them, these become the apogees of our existence. And that's the way I see it. So creating those moments of infinity, where everything, you're on the verge of losing it all or earning it all. It's that fine line. That's where the fruit is. That's what I talk about in that TEDx talk. It's such a fine balance. And because success cannot be reached unless you equally accept failure, at least for me. So, and I think this is the moment again of transparent introspection. It's a very pure moment that is fleeting, but at the same time, those dots that are connected gives you incredible perspective in the everyday blur.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one because in many ways, personally, I'm always looking for this balance of striving and becoming, because I tell people that we should be much more interested in who we're becoming than who we are, to a certain degree. That keeps us going in many ways. And I think that who we are becoming, if we are focused on it, particularly when someone's going through a personal transformation, that could enable them to stay on the path. However, for me, I try to overlay it with a kind of desire to also be comfortable in being And, they're not always, you know, you know, that's not always the case, right? Because sometimes, particularly in this period, I've been in a bit of a weird patch. And when I am in a state of being, there's a certain level of discomfort. And like you said, those old thoughts, those old emotions, certain things that I thought that I had moved through, I could feel them creeping back. And I realized the other day that I got to go on another journey. And it's what you're talking about. So when you talk about failure and your relationship with failure, I'm gonna push that out a little bit. What's your relationship with death?
Well, failure, I mean, in my field, death is failure. That's the ultimate failure. And that's kind of what I was indirectly referring to. I really had that thought before I did a ski base jump from the summit of Mont Blanc. I've done a few on Mont Blanc, and I just did another first last June, but the particular one where it all clicked was the one I did from the very summit, which had never been done. Was very important for me because it's the mountain I grew up in front of, and the error margin was so slim that I knew that death was very much an option, a possibility. It wasn't not an option. Death was very much a possibility. But once dying is accepted, living is mandatory. And I also asked myself, are you willing to potentially die for this jump? And my question without any hesitation was absolutely. And so my relationship with death is that it's not that I want it, but it's that I fully accepted it. It's when I did that ski base jump, but from then it's really again going back to that lesson of acceptance in the mountains, and that's really the and I think I accepted death a long time ago, just from losing a lot of friends and knowing that it's a reality in my field and coming very close myself. But coming back from a near-death experience is a gruesome journey, and they're fully, truly accepting it. And it was not giving up. It was just fully, pragmatically accepting my human state and my commitment to my goals. And therefore, before dropping in, I asked myself, well, what if you die on this jump? I was like, well, if I'm supposed to die somewhere, it's here. This is where I'd want to stay forever. But if there is a forever, who knows? But if I succeed, whatever I get out of this, whatever fulfillment or glory or satisfaction or whatever it is, I also know this would be probably the ultimate of my career as a ski mountaineer, and therefore as a person more than just a ski mountaineer. So for me, therefore, living or dying was equally worth it.
If your son wanted to follow your footsteps, how would you feel?
It would be hard, of course, because we want the safety of our offsprings, right? But I would teach him everything I can. I would take him under my wing, literally, to give him as many tools as he can to survive. But I also think I could not be a hypocrite and tell him, no, you can't do that because it's too dangerous. I'd be like, no, do it, but do it well. He could actually do it way better than I do because I've learned to be thorough, but he is naturally poised as a being, which I'm finally, for the first time in my life, for the last year, since everything kind of clicked together, and then I also, met my ultimate, in a person as well. It's the first time in my life that I actually have serenity. But he is born a very serene person. I had that feeling since he was a baby, and he's dropping vert ramp on a skateboard. He skis really well. He's very poised about whatever he does. And some stuff he does, I'm like, oh God, this is gnarly. But so I would be terrified, but I also know it would be incredible to jump off a cliff with my son.
In your sport, do you have to be I would imagine you'd have to be a really prepared, thorough, poised person, but I also imagine there's a lot of nutcases, fucking just people that are really on the edge. what's the
Yeah.
relationship between that? Like, because I would imagine nothing's haphazard. Like, you couldn't be haphazard out there, right? When you're preparing to do a project or whatever. Or, I mean, is there an element of luck, or is everything literally prepared? Does it look like luck to us, but you guys are like prepared to the nth degree? Like, what's the real reality?
Well, I think I can't answer that question for every jumper out there, right? Risk is personal, so people handle risk very differently. I'm um I'm I'm a messy person, but I'm so OCD at the same time, And I think OCD in base jumping is probably one of the best character traits you can have until a certain point. Then you get to a certain point and be like, okay, I am clearly, going in circle in my head right now and overthinking everything. I've triple, quadruple checked everything. Let's go, But but yeah, no, I try to plan as much as I can, but there's only so much you can plan, right? When your endeavor takes place in a natural environment with a lot of elements that are ever changing. So I always say that, I pull the trigger on a project when I'm 70% sure, for example, that the weather is going to line up. So by the time I get to the mound, or I'm getting there to drop, conditions are hopefully 90 to 100%, but it's never fully perfect. So you have to always be ready to react and adapt. And I guess that's life, right? Life is an ever-changing environment. Always a flawless execution often requires a flawless recovery. That's that's really important. And I think that's the thing with base jumping. That's why you got to keep your. I rarely go 100%, with the error margin, like where the error margin is 0 and you have to be at a perfect execution. I'm at 80, 90%. The Mont Blanc jump was probably like a 95% commitment with a 5% error margin.
What is that always an error margin? Like, the error margin mean?
The error margin as far as height of the object, where's the wind coming from, what's your window to open a parachute, to fly, to make the landing area, is the snow stable, is there an avalanche danger, taking in all the variables. And obviously it's very subjective because you don't have like hard facts that you can write down, but you get a feel for it, and I can kind of picture, I can almost taste the error margin. And I try to operate with a 10 to 20% error margin so that if something goes worse than expected, there's room to recover. But sometimes you only have 5%, and so there's not going to be a ton of room to recover, but the numbers add up. But if the numbers add up just barely, if the error margin is low, then you ask yourself, are you okay with the execution, the frame of execution, and the error margin? And if you're not, then turn around. It's not your day. You're not the man for the job. So, or the job is not for you.
That's a good way of putting it. We 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 have Stephen Kotler coming on the show, and he's renowned for covering your sport, and he's the resident expert on the state of flow.
Yeah, the rise of Superman.
Yeah, he's written some pretty good stuff, and one of the things that he was talked about is, and it's funny, your upcoming project, Adrenaline Sucks. I don't know if it's a play on words, but like, I read some of his material that followed athletes that are in pursuits similar to you, and they talk about adrenaline actually being really counterproductive, almost kind of something you do not want to get into a state of. Would you, people would call you an adrenaline junkie. I don't know if that's true or not. What's your comment to that? Like, what's the relationship of adrenaline to what you do? Is it good, bad, or is it indifferent?
Adrenaline is just a simple byproduct that has been overly used, and we're always downgraded as action sport athletes as adrenaline junkies. And that was the idea behind Adrenaline Sucks, is to set the record straight once and for all, or I guess to try to. And the thing is that I realized is I couldn't be mad at people for calling me an adrenaline junkie or daredevil when they were not educated in the matter. At first I was kind of pissed, but then I was like, well, it's pointless to be pissed because they don't know. They're obviously uneducated, and some of them are super smart people. They just don't know what it's like. So it's like, I'm going to do my best to break it down, which is why I came up with Adrenaline Sucks, which is an open letter where I break down the whole process and philosophy behind what I'm doing, or as much as I can, right? So adrenaline is disappearing more and more with the level of expertise. You have it more in the discovery phase, in the reinforcement phase is still there, and then it just diminishes. And now it's almost, it sounds bad, but while I'm doing it, I'm like, of course it works. It's business as usual. It's just exactly what I plan on doing. And he went perfectly according to the plan. But when I land and I turn around, also that's when I realized that these moments cannot be taken for granted, because the stars aligned, the conditions were right, and then I was ready and approached it very rationally and intentionally. But it's still, these moments are still a gift, which is why a lot of these moments will never, ever be repeated again, And that's why a lot of them were actual first, because nobody had either didn't picture it or see it happening, or if they saw it, they somehow were not able to line up the right conditions to do it. So that's why it's that fine balance between, oh yeah, it's normal, to holy shit, that was the magic of the moment, But adrenaline doesn't really have a place in that anymore. I don't seek it at all. And I think it's a preconceived idea that is used to, just like, we don't know what's after death. Well, we invent a paradise, or an existence of God, to answer all our existential fears. We don't understand why people take risk. Well, let's just label them, let's just put a blanket statement, call them adrenaline junkies, because we're uneducated in the matter, because we just don't know. And, obviously the existence of God, we'll know that when our expiration date comes, whether it exists or not. But as far as adrenaline goes, or being an adrenaline junkie, yeah, I've lived that plenty of times, and I know exactly that it's not what I seek. Because if you seek the rush, it's pretty shallow and disrespectful to your craft in many ways, and it's gonna fucking kill you at some point. So I mean, that's fine. If you want to die, that's all good. But do you want to just squeeze the fruit to the last drop? Yeah, don't be a freaking junkie. That's not the goal. You don't want to be a hardcore motherfucker chasing the rush. You want to be a serene motherfucker. That's the idea.
Brilliant stuff, man. So, Matthias, we are going to start to land the plane, but we always start to really focus on habits and action items that our audience can take away. And I think what I want to ask you is, I think your relationship to risk, to fear, to mortality is different and it's unique. If a person wanted to start to push the bar in terms of their risk appetite in their lives, what could they do to start to push the boundaries, I suppose, on their tolerance?
Well, first I would say that risk for risk is idiotic. You don't do something just because it's risky. Do you want to go dive with great white sharks because you might get eaten? Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the risk makes it a little exciting, right? But it's not the goal in itself. Again, it's just another variable to deal with. Do you want to go dive with great white sharks because you think they're magnificent animals and you want to get to them as close as you can because you fully admire them? That's a different thing. So what I would tell people, if you're thinking about doing something different that is risky, spend some time reflecting on your ethos. Because ethos is everything. If you don't have the ethos, whatever you're trying to build is going to be a leaning tower of Pisa. It's not going to be, it'll probably stand out, but it's not going to be solid, or it'll be, kind of weirdly crooked. I mean, that's fine. I have nothing wrong with weird. I guess the leaning tower was not necessarily a great example for this, but I would say, question your ethos, because your ethos is what matters in the end, because that's what's going to make you thorough or not. That's also what's going to help you get back on your feet after you fail, after you crash, after you're almost dead. This is also what will push you to recover. And this is when we fail that our ethos matters most. And this is also something that is necessary to succeed, because your ethos will make sure you have, if you have ethos, you'll make sure you have all your ducks in a row, and then you will do it assiduously. That's it. I think it's about being assiduous. It's not about risk. It's about your ethos.
And And I think what you're saying is like, if you know why you're doing it,
Yeah.
like if there's, if it's purpose, and that purpose will, if we're dedicating to that purpose and we become that purpose, it will naturally stretch the bounds of our tolerance.
100%. I think, it goes back to that good old quote of Nietzsche, which was cited in Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which is very interesting because some of the Nazi ideas were based on were taken out some of the ideas from Nietzsche. And then that same quote from Nietzsche helped a Jewish psychiatrist survive the concentration camp, which is what I find super interesting about that quote, because it could have been used for doom and despair and destruction, or actual survival and meaning. And that quote is, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow." So you get a why, you can do anything. That's pretty much what that quote says. So you get a why, you can handle any kind of risk, but your why better be solid. So ask yourself that first before you take a risk.
Oh man, we're gonna close on that, man. That is absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Matthias. Where can our audience learn more about the project Adrenaline Sucks? Where can they learn more about you, bro?
So right now, obviously, if you stay posted on my social media, Instagram is Super Frenchie Official on Facebook and LinkedIn as well. Twitter is at Matthias Giraud, my first name, last name. Adrenaline Sucks is right now not available for view anywhere you want, whenever you want. It's on the film festival circuit. It's doing really well. We got it premiered at the Mandy Film Festival, which was a mountain film festival in Spain. So we're on the Mandy tour right now, which has 50 dates, I think, through Spain and Europe. So stay posted, because we might be at some European film festivals as well, other ones that have not been confirmed yet, so I can't say it yet. But stay posted on my social media, because I will keep people posted on where it's going to play and when. But also, Adrenaline Sucks is available for, private showing with speaking engagements and open discussion, because I truly love talking about this and exchanging ideas with people. I love people to challenge me and help me reflect, or we can reflect on things together. So if you're interested in having Adrenaline Sucks there for a company meeting, an event, whatever, you can hit up either my business manager, Carlos at superfrenchie.com, or you can handle my tour, contact my tour manager. His name is John Davis, John at 1988entertainment.com. So that's how to get in touch. So.
All right, brother, man. Thank you again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Take care.